T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Out of the Tunnel on Jackwagon Sports. It is a very special episode. As you can see, we are in person together. We shrunk Nick down to be a little less annoying, and so here we are. But we have two special guest pickers. We got my nephew Mason and my brother-in-law Laramie, who just wanted to be a part of the show today. But we have a great show for you guys today. It's Rivalry Weekend, which is the best weekend in college football, so we have a lot to talk about with that stuff. But we are excited to get into today's show with you guys. We're going to go ahead and get into our first topic of the day, and that is your favorite rivalries outside of college football. I know Laramie's favorite, but I'll let him go first, and you can tell us all about the Duke-UNC basketball rivalry.
Actually, I'm gonna change that.
Oh, okay.
It's definitely Orioles-Yankees, and I must say I feel bad for all the Yankees fans losing all the time to us.
Yeah.
But that's got to be my favorite outside of college football rivalry.
I mean, it's not a bad one. It's not a rivalry when the Orioles never win, but it's okay. Slade, what's yours?
Yeah, I think that I would go with either the Orioles-Yankees or Duke-UNC. I feel like those are the two biggest rivalries outside of college football or just the NFL in general. So I think that would be what I would go with.
Yeah. Mason, who would you pick?
Probably Orioles-Yankees.
Oh, my God, you face. You guys took the other ones, so I would say the Bears-Packers. I mean, it's two teams that just do not like each other at all, and even when the Bears suck. Aaron Rodgers finds a way to rub it in our face, so that makes it fun. That would be my other one. The Celtics-Lakers, even though I feel like that hasn't been as prominent lately. They still have a lot of hatred towards each other, so it is still fun to watch. But those are ours. Let us know what your guys' favorite rivalries outside of college football are. We're just going to keep moving along here. And yesterday we had a packed slate of college football games. Iowa gets upset by Nebraska. So now if I believe it's Wisconsin, if they win today, they will go to the Big Ten championship game. Can't remember the exact team. But that shook up things because all they needed to do was win, and they were playing Michigan or Ohio State next week. Now they got to sit at home and wait. Adds to a little bit of anxiety. We had UNC lose at home to NC State in double overtime, which was a really good game. Florida State, Florida was a great game as well. So Slade, we'll start with you. Just your thoughts on the games and how they affect today and the rest of the season.
Yeah, so I think that the main game that I would think that affects the rest of the season possibly would be the Texas game yesterday. I mean, they had a big game against Baylor, and it was a must-win for them to have a chance at the conference championship game, Big 12. So that coupled with the fact that UNC just could not run their offense and save their lives yesterday, I think those were the two big takeaways from yesterday when it came to rivalry week.
Laramie, I know we didn't get to watch much football yesterday, but just your thoughts on the games yesterday.
We saw the replays, and I think we caught the end of the game that went to overtime. The Big Ten, somebody's playing to lose against either Michigan or Ohio State. None of that really matters, in my opinion. I'd like to see them change that whole setup so that maybe they could get it to where number one and number two plays. They just have one conference. We caught, 15 minutes of football yesterday because I had you working all day. So,
yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. And Slade and I talked about this last week. Like, I rip on it, and it's not a bad thing, and it adds a lot of enjoyment to the college football. But it's, as an Oregon fan, it stresses me out sitting there like, okay, listen, we are the best team in the North. We lost to Washington. Now, either way, we would have a tiebreaker with Washington right now. If we lose this week, we have to play them again. or they would get in. Excuse me. But there definitely should be a better solution because you should not. I don't believe that having a 4-loss team in any conference should be fighting for a title and a chance to go to the Rose Bowl and so on. And then we've already seen if Iowa does make it in, Michigan and Ohio State have both already played Iowa. It was not a good game. And so, there's definitely better ways to do it. And maybe with UCLA and USC coming over, that might force them to do a different, style, and we'll see how they handle that. Hopefully Oregon comes over too. But you didn't. I don't know if you got to watch any football.
No, I didn't.
But the other thing that I noticed yesterday, and we didn't talk about it yet, is Missouri beats Arkansas, and now Missouri is bowl eligible. So there's a possibility of Kansas and Missouri reigniting their rivalry, which would be really cool. It's sad that we haven't seen that. I believe it's 2008 or 2009 was the last time we saw that game. So hopefully we get that. That would be really cool. And then we talked about this. The charges came out this week. 7 players were charged. I believe 3 of them were felonies from the Michigan State-Michigan brawl in the tunnel. And Slade, just your thoughts on that. We've talked about Michigan trying to beef up their security. They put stricter schedules in. And then we saw last week Michigan was supposed to leave the tunnel first. They did not. And then that caused a little bit of uproar with Illinois because they're like, why can't we leave the tunnel if Michigan's not? And then they had to delay halftime another 2 minutes, or the start of the second half another 2 minutes, so Illinois can get the proper stretching and stuff in. Slade, just your thoughts on everything.
Yeah, I think that there's an easy fix to this. I think that Michigan has home field advantage when you go to their field. They should be the first off the field and get to go into the locker rooms and start their game plan for the second half. And then I think whoever's there, this past week, Illinois was the team that was there. So I think Illinois should then also have to leave the tunnel first. This saves the only way that there's altercations if Michigan's not following the rules then.
Right.
All of the blame is on Michigan then at that point. Because right now they're just playing the blame game with whatever school's in town.
Yeah.
We saw that the one Michigan guy that he got beat up pretty bad with a helmet and stuff. It wasn't like he was just walking through there accidentally late. Like he was looking to cause problems also. So it's just, I think that they need to put all of the pressure on Michigan, and that if anything happens further than with the way that I just talked about, I think that that's their easiest fix. Then if anything happens, it's on Michigan. They get the penalties, they get fined, whatever, because they're putting other schools at risk now.
Yeah. I don't think there's any reason Michigan doesn't build a second tunnel, or they can't. You could easily just replace those couple hundred seats with just another little row at the top. I think they'll be more than fine to do that. I understand it's a historical stadium and all this other stuff, but at some point, especially when I would say the Penn State incident, it's 2 teams that don't like each other. I understand that. And any Ohio State, instances in this tunnels, again, rivals, I understand that. The Michigan State one, like you said, there's no reason for those players to head to the locker room already. Michigan State is upset, and I get that. There's no reason for them to do what they did still, but there needs to be better. And up until last week, I feel like they were doing a better job with it. I don't think they had as many home games, but still, I think the best solution is just build a second tunnel somewhere, and then you would eliminate this. Laramie, any thoughts from you on this?
Oh, no, I agree wholeheartedly, but their argument is going to be, this is one of the historic stadiums in college football.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to make changes to it. I feel the same way about Beaver Stadium. Like, unless they're adding stuff, I don't want you to take anything away. But with this now, with felonies, that you can't ignore that.
Right.
If it was a scuffle here, a scuffle there, they get into that before games sometimes. Nothing comes of it. Teams get penalized. But spend the money, make the changes. You don't have to worry about this anymore.
Right. I 100% agree. Any thoughts on the Michigan tunnel? I see you're wearing your Michigan jersey. You just say let them fight, and then Michigan gets all the advantages there.
Yeah, I think they should build another tunnel to stop all of the disagreements, and that's mostly it.
Alrighty. We're gonna move ahead here. I can't do that from here. All right. Simple enough topic. I should have really wrote this down on a piece of paper, but here we are. Just your favorite college football rivalry games. List any you want. We'll let the guests go first. Mason, who was your It doesn't have to be one. You can list multiple.
I think Michigan and Ohio State.
That's a good one. Uncle Laramie, you got anything?
I mean, I'm going to say Penn State, Ohio State, even though people are going to say that that's not a rivalry. I feel it is, but we just haven't lived up to our side of it here lately. The same goes for Penn State and Michigan. I love when those guys come into town and we can catch a game, especially a whiteout with that. But, yeah.
Yeah, I have 5. So I think that the game that we're going to see today, which is called the game OSU versus Michigan, I think is a big one. And they're in no particular order. Army-Navy, I think, is a great rivalry. It's actually pretty close. Their rivalry game right now is 62, 53, and 7, with Navy leading that right now. The Iron Bowl, I think, is a great one. I think that it wouldn't be as great of a rivalry if we didn't have the game from, 2011 or something like that, when Auburn ran the ball back on the kickoff with like a couple seconds left in the game. USC Notre Dame, I think that one's unique just because it's rumored that it started because the coach for Notre Dame and the coach for USC, their wives wanted their teams to play together because they were friends.
Yeah.
So it's rumored that's how that rivalry game started. And the last one, it's not a game right now, but I hope that they bring it back. It's just because of the name. It's called the Holy War, and it's between BYU and Utah. And I just think that the name of the game is pretty cool, and that it's the Holy War.
Yeah, I believe they played. I think it was 2 years ago. Maybe, hopefully, it's just like a hiatus, and maybe once they're in the Big 12, they can start bringing that back. As we see, Jesse chiming in, the Ohio State-Penn State game is not a rivalry, which I agree with him. But I think a better rivalry game for Penn State, and maybe this is just because it's what I feel locally here, would be Penn State Notre Dame. I mean, if you think back, that was the very first whiteout game. I believe it was 2007. But I mean, locally here in Pennsylvania, I feel like everybody's either a Penn State fan or a Notre Dame fan, just because the Catholic faith is so huge here. I think in Pennsylvania alone, that would be a really fun rivalry game. I remember when they played a couple years ago, how much fun everybody was having with it and so on. I think that would be fun to see played every year. If Notre Dame does go to the Big Ten here in a few years, I mean, I think we see that. But I think that would be a really good one to institute. I think that would be more so a rivalry than Ohio State. I get that it's Pennsylvania versus Ohio. It's just I don't think either team cares enough about it. And with all due respect, the only time Penn State beats them is when you have a special game at the middle of the night and so on. So I think it's less so that Penn State doesn't win, as much as they would like to. I think it's both teams. There's just no drive there to be like, Ohio is better than Pennsylvania. Penn State Pitt, I would argue, is a better rivalry too. One that I think they should be playing every year. Those were two teams that when they played, I believe it was like 4 years in a row they played. They hated each other. You could see it. They wanted to beat each other. They're putting up billboards in each other's cities and so on. And they made that into a rivalry in just a short time. And there was a little bit of history there too. Some of my other favorite rivalries, I believe Notre Dame USC is one of the best. I would also say Notre Dame Navy, two teams that have a lot of respect for each other, but do not like each other on the football field. And I'll never forget, I was at the first game where Navy beat Notre Dame. I believe it was in 43 years, and I was told I was never allowed to go to another Notre Dame game. And I would say UNC, NC State has become better over the years. I mean, we've seen the last few years. It's
Especially
going to
yesterday.
overtime. Yeah, it's going to overtime. It's coming down the last second field goal, so on. Those games are really good. And again, it's two teams. It's the other side of the Tobacco Road rivalry that never gets talked about. Everybody talks about UNC Duke, especially because of basketball. But everybody forgets that NC State is in that triangle too. And again, they've got. I feel like they kind of tailed off the last few years in basketball, but still, football-wise, UNC and NC State just do not like each other at all. I mean, I could sit here all day and talk about my favorite rivalries. One that I brought up earlier, and we're going to talk here about rivalry games that we want to see brought back.
I like this one.
Yeah, we'll do this one. Oh, God, I'm clicking on the wrong ones. But yeah, so rivalry games that we think should be brought back, like we just said, I want Kansas, Missouri back. Two that came back this year that I was happy to see, but I don't think they're going to be around for too long, is the backyard brawl with West Virginia and Pitt. I mean, we talked about two teams that hated each other, and we saw that this year. And the other one was West Virginia, Virginia Tech. That's been played, I believe, the last 2 years now. That's a lot of fun to see. Local rivalries like that. But Larry, we'll start with you. What is one or a few that you would like to see brought back?
So I would say, we like you said, we did see Penn State Pitt. Bringing that back to be every year would be a great thing because of just the locality of it. And really, you get, Penn State, I know it's in the middle of the state, but really, with being up there, that's like all Philly people.
Yeah.
And you get that atmosphere of Philly and Pittsburgh. They do not like each other. I think bringing that back every year would be awesome. That would be one I would probably end up wanting to go to every year.
Yeah.
So personally, that'd be nice for me. Offhand, that's the only one I can actually really think of. So
now you're new to college football. You're still getting into it. But is there any rivalries you've been told about that you want to see played?
Yes. So I would like to bring back Notre Dame and Penn State.
That is a good one. The other Notre Dame one I want to bring back would be Notre Dame, Michigan. Again, hopefully Notre Dame goes to the Big Ten. Notre Dame belongs in the Big Ten more so than the ACC. A lot of the rivals are there. It's local. It's recruiting battles. I don't like that they're in the ACC. For basketball they are, but football they're kind of. Notre Dame, Michigan would probably be the top of my list outside of Notre Dame, Penn State. Just because again, it's two teams that just do not like each other.
Well, it's old. There's a lot of old schools with games that were played, 50, 60 years ago that, our parents still remember that, when they do play, that brings up old memories that, they get angry and they haven't played in 15 years.
Yeah. And we're seeing the last few years, they play here and there and every once in a while. And it's always a special game, even when the thing, and we're going to talk about here in a second, the thing to me that makes a rivalry game so special is it doesn't matter how bad your season's going. If you beat this one team on that one day, if that made your season, we might not win the championship. We might not make a bowl game. But, hey, we just ruined your season, and now we beat our rival. We get a recruiting edge over you, and it helps your season so much more than going undefeated and losing to your rival, I feel like, anyway. Slade, some rivalries you want brought back?
Yeah, I think that I have two. The first one would be Nebraska-Oklahoma. I think that would be a good one to bring back. That was more when Nebraska was in the Big 12. But the other one would be the Holy War that I already talked about, Utah and BYU. I just think it's a cool name for it. You got the game for Michigan, Ohio State. You've got the Iron Bowl. You've got these cool names for the different things. So I just think that would be a cool one to bring back.
Yeah. But back to I think Nebraska-Mizzou was also a really good rivalry game. Back when both of those teams were really good in the 80s and 90s, those games decided who was playing for the national championship most years. And Nebraska and Colorado, they play every few years on and off. But again, that's one I feel like needs to be played every single year. I know next year they play in Colorado, and the year after that it'll be back in Nebraska. But that's a game that needs to be played every year. Those old school rivalries from the late 80s and 90s, they have a lot of history attached to them. And then this new age with realignment and all this other stuff, we lost so many of those games. And I feel like that's what college football is lacking, is there's not enough rivalries. Everything is forced. Like we'll talk about next, we're going to talk about the rivalries that aren't really rivalries. The one that comes to mind is Penn State and Maryland. Listen, it's a border war, and I understand that, and it should be a rivalry game. Nobody cares about Maryland football, though. But Maryland football fans barely care about Maryland football.
Well, they don't show up to the games.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was just thinking, though. It's if Maryland gets good and for consistent years plays good games against Penn State, it's going to become more of a rivalry. But if they're consistently losing, like Penn State does to Ohio State, no one's going to consider it that.
Right.
And I think that along with right now, if the teams aren't good, you aren't going to hear about it at all. You're not going to hear about it on sports talk radio. You're not going to hear about it, pregame, talk shows about it. Mm-hmm. They're just, no one's going to talk about it. So unless you are a fan of that school, no one else is going to consider it a rivalry.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the fact that Penn State is 42-3-1 against Maryland since the start of this rivalry, I think that just shows that there's a big discrepancy in what's a rivalry and what's not. I think that the location is definitely what makes people describe that. Also, the first game that Penn State played against Maryland didn't score a point, and this past game that they just played, Maryland didn't score a point. So they're having a rough time at defining a rivalry against Penn State.
And I don't want to put it on the same level, but I feel like, I mean, being in Ohio this past year and just hearing Jesse, one of our favorite listeners, talk about it, is they kind of look at Ohio State looks at Penn State the same way you look at Maryland. I mean, the Penn State-Ohio State rivalry is a lot closer because, yeah, there are a lot of good games and stuff. But I feel like, again, it's more so the fans trying to push it on, like, oh, we don't like each other. And again, I think the players and coaches are just like, oh, it's just another Big Ten game. And then you look at the Penn State-Maryland game, and James Franklin's like, yeah, they're our rivals. And, Maryland goes all in on this. They make graphics every year, and Penn State's just like, yep, we play Maryland this Saturday at 3:30, come watch, kind of thing. But on the same level, Penn State needs to have a big rivalry in the Big Ten, just because right now their rivalry Saturday game every year is the Michigan State game. They play for a trophy, but again, I feel like that's more of a forced rivalry. We're forced to play for a trophy now. And I understand they put a lot of history behind it. It's I believe the first two land grant schools, and that's why they play for the land grant trophy and so on. But again, it is forced. Everything feels forced, and that's what kind of takes away from a lot of these games is, everybody tries to manufacture this hype, and the players are like, we don't care. Like, you need teams that hate each other, whether they're locally or across the country. It doesn't matter. Like Notre Dame, USC aren't neighbors, but they do not like each other. They always play the last Saturday. It always usually has college football playoff implications, or for USC, title implications and so on and so forth. But you think back to forced nationwide rivalries. I remember when UConn and UCF UConn more so than anybody tried to make a rivalry with UCF because it was the I-95 war. And UCF looked at them and went, we're not your rival. Like, we want nothing to do with you. Just because we're in the conference and we share a highway, like, we don't want anything to do with you. But now we'll look at this. And what does it take to make a good rivalry football game? Or even just any rivalry in general? Slade, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing is that the games need to go back and forth for it to be a continued rivalry. Not just one-sided like we see with maybe Ohio State against Penn State or Penn State against Maryland. I mean, it's all over the country. And the games need to mean something. There need to be implications like you just talked about with USC, Notre Dame. We're going to see today with Michigan and Ohio State, there's the possibility that one of them don't make the college football playoffs based on this game this weekend. There's also a possibility that they both make it, but a lot has to happen for something like that. And then I think the last one is just like the bad blood of the two teams. Something had to have happened, whether like someone did something dirty or someone's tweeting out about the coach's wife, whatever the deal is. Like I think that something has to happen off the field also for it to kind of be recognized by both sides as a rivalry. Like you said, Jesse and people from Ohio don't really view Penn State in that game as a rivalry, but everyone from Penn State views it as a rivalry. So, like, I think that it needs to be both sides viewing it as a rivalry for it to be a great rivalry.
Let Mason go first, and then we'll steal all his ideas. What makes a good rivalry game to you?
So, yes, I think that the games have to be, like, really high scoring and that they have to go back and forth a lot to really go and make a rivalry.
So the Big Ten West doesn't have any good rivalries. Your thoughts on what makes a good rivalry game?
So I think it's hard for college football to get rivals or at least harder than your NBA or your MLB because you have players that play for teams for 10, 15 years. And when that player and maybe a player from an opposing team that does kind of have a rivalry going, they don't like each other. That is so much easier than to get your fans behind. And they're not gone in 3 or 4 years. They're there for a decade. So I think a little bit of it has to do with that. You don't get to know the players nationally in college. And once you do, they're in the NFL. Now they're playing, in a rivalry game in the NFL. Locally, your team, your players. But they don't know each other on opposing teams, or if they do, you don't hear about it at all. They're not getting interviewed like they do in major sports after every game that they're required to go and talk, getting questions asked about those things. So I think it's a lot easier for your professional sports to create those rivalries and then keep them going for much longer.
Right. No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, you think about it, it's always, I mean, for years it was LeBron versus Kevin Durant or LeBron versus whoever, and that helped. Now it's, I guess not so much anymore, but it was LeBron versus Steph, so on. And that definitely helped fuels, fans' investment into it, and that drives up your ratings. For me, like you said, I feel like it's hard to create new rivalries in college football just because, again, it's hard to do anything now that's new that doesn't feel forced or like it's a marketing scheme or something like that. It needs to develop naturally. Like Slade said, Maryland, if Maryland goes out there and just like starts a line brawl, like they just start just beating the crap out of Penn State for the first snap of the game. Okay, Penn State is not going to like that. And then, again,
go out, start tearing the middle of the field up or something like that. Who was that? Baker Mayfield planting the flag.
There needs to be a spark of hatred between the two teams. And again, like a lot of those rivalries that went away, locality will help, but it's not a necessity. Again, like you said, there's a lot of cross-country rivals. Notre Dame or USC is the big one everybody looks to. I think that helps. So is because Notre Dame is such a national brand that, hey, we're doing a lot of recruiting in LA. It helps. We can go to these recruits' houses and be like, look, we beat USC, or we need you to help us beat USC, so on. But I think the biggest thing is that I didn't hear anybody mention, it needs a name. Like, if you have a name to a rivalry, a good name, I should say, like the game, the backyard brawl, like
the Holy War. I never even heard of that until right now. I love that.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, if you could have like just a memorable name, and again, it's hard to come up with those now that it doesn't feel tacky or cheesy. Like if somebody came up to me like, hey, we're going to start this new football game, we're going to call it the Holy War, I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, probably should not do that. But
and good games get named a decade later. We have all these names from professional games, college games that everybody remembers. They didn't get named. They didn't have a name until a decade later, until your memories come up. Yes, correct. What happened in the game gives it that name.
Right.
So yeah, it's hard to, like you said, you just pick a name out of a hat and try to go with that.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I think there's a lot of rivalries out there that could be developed and really pushed upon, and that's what makes college football so fun. Is especially this Saturday, a lot of these teams, like the Michigan-Ohio State game, is so much cooler this year because it has all these implications. But if Michigan and Ohio State both only had 2 wins each, I would still be watching this game just for the fact that you never know what's going to happen. You don't know how many fights there's going to be, who's going to walk off the field giving double birds to the fans, like we saw so many years ago. But again, this is a game that's been around for over 100 years, and it's established. It's hard to kind of replicate that feeling. It doesn't take a lot of time. Maybe one day Michigan or Penn State, Maryland is going to be the best rivalry game, and we just don't believe it right now. But again, until Maryland figures out how to win more games, or at least keep the score close, and I feel like until a spark happens between those two teams, we're not going to see that. But let's go ahead. It's time to move into our picks. We're going to look at our upset alerts to start with Nick Knock here. He is going with Oregon to get upset on the road at Oregon State. They're both ranked. This is only the 9th time, or excuse me, it's the 5th time in the AP poll that both of these teams were ranked and meeting, and this is over their 100th meeting. So usually one of them is not very good in this matchup. Usually it's Oregon State. I'm not going to say anything about that right now, though. But this is going to be a very good matchup. So Nick is taking them for his upset alert. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm going with Oregon today. I think that.
I meant your upset alert.
Oh, my upset alert. Sorry. I got to look here quick. So my upset alert is Kansas State today because it has huge implications. Kind of the same thing I was getting ready to say for Oregon, which I'll get to in a couple minutes. But yeah, Kansas State is my upset alert for today.
Alrighty. Mason, who is your upset alert for today?
So my upset alert is Michigan at Ohio State, and I think that Michigan will win.
That's a good pick. Laramie, who do you put on upset alert this week?
I put South Carolina beating Clemson. And again, all of my picks are personal. If Clemson can lose and drop out of the top 10, that just gives Penn State a better chance of getting into New Year's Day 6 Bowl.
Yeah. Ignore the graphics mess up by me there. But yeah, so Laramie's taking South Carolina. I am. I guess I'm going to take number 10, Tennessee, at Vanderbilt. Listen, Hendon Hooker is now out with a torn ACL. This is a Tennessee offense we saw once he left that game last week. They really struggled. This is a red-hot Vanderbilt team right now. They've won back-to-back SEC games for the first time in, I think, forever after getting their first win in 2 years in the SEC. If they win this game, they will go to a bowl game. So there's added motivation there. Again, this is a rivalry game that kind of lost its lackluster because Vanderbilt is not very good. But Tennessee has, decided they want to checker out Vanderbilt Stadium, and Vanderbilt is not very happy about that. So there's going to be added bad blood to this game. I think Vanderbilt can come out. We have seen them hang with a lot of very good teams in the SEC. They were beating Ole Miss for a half. They beat a very good Florida team last week. And 2 weeks ago, they beat Kentucky. Again, just the implications this game has on Vanderbilt's season. Who would have thought at the end of last season when Vanderbilt won one game, we're going to be sitting here talking about a bowl-eligible Vanderbilt, just like in the same way we were talking where UConn is bowl-eligible and so is Kansas. So big implications for this game. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at our cash-out picks here real quick. We're going to get Nick's here, and we're going to look at those first. So Nick's cash-out picks, he's taking the Minnesota-Wisconsin over 36.5. On his sheet, he put 25.5, which I hope they score more than 25 points. But the website said 36.5, so that's what I'm going to put in there. He's also taking the Army UMass under 45, which I think can definitely hit. UMass, we've seen, does not have a very good offense, and their defense held Texas A&M to 17 points last week. And he's taking the Oklahoma spread. They're favored by 2.5 points. Slade, what are your picks for this week?
Yeah, so I only picked one because I couldn't really find a great second one that I thought would actually work out. I went with Duke plus 3.5. I think they have a really good opportunity of getting that done this week, so that's why I went with just one.
You took their spread last week, too, I noticed.
Yeah, they won.
Yeah. So my picks this week, Auburn is plus 21.5 against Alabama. Listen, I understand Auburn is very bad this year, but we've seen under Cadillac Williams' leadership, they're a very hard-nosed, tough team. They like to hang with their opponents all season. And again, this is a huge rivalry game. Doesn't matter how good Alabama is or how bad Auburn is or vice versa. These are two teams that don't like each other. They always bring intensity. Last year, we saw what I felt like was a worse Auburn team, honestly, to watch on football or on TV. I believe it was overtime they took Alabama to, or it was a last-second drive that came up short. Either way, that was a very good game. I think this year's going to be much of the same. I think this is closer than 3 scores. The other bet I'm taking today is Notre Dame USC under 63. Notre Dame, as we've seen all year, doesn't have the best offense in college football. It depends how they're feeling that day. But their defense is one of the top in the country. I think this will be USC's toughest test to get into the playoffs, depending on what happens with Oregon, UCLA, and Washington today. But I think this is going to be a lower scoring game. And again, I think it comes down to the wire. Utah, Colorado, I'm taking over 52. I think Utah can hang 52 on Colorado alone. But if they score a touchdown or two, that'll help the over hit. We're going to go ahead and take a look real quick. If it loads. At our standings heading into this week. So Slade and I are still tied atop at 81 and 46. Nick is only 5 games back at 77 and 50. Or is that 4 games? That's 4 games back, excuse me. And Cash Out, he still leads the way. I actually had my first positive week, and I think ever last week, and I'm still losing though in Cash Out picks. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our game picks. Our first game up is West Virginia at Oklahoma State. This will be 12 p.m. on ESPN2. Oklahoma State is an 8-point favorite. The over-under is 62.5. Nick is going to take Oklahoma State at home. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, so, I mean, on our document, Nick already put me as a loss. I went with West Virginia in this game. I think that they're able to
I thought that was a joke.
What?
I thought I screenshotted it the other day and I sent it to you, and I thought you said you didn't do that. Nick did that.
Oh, no. I put West Virginia. Sorry. He highlighted it in red as if I had already lost. But
I thought he highlighted it to be like, hey, make sure you do this.
No. A bit of a mix-up. But, yeah, no, I went with West Virginia here. I think that Oklahoma State has shown that they're just up and down all season, and I just think that they're going to have a hard time closing out their season here.
Mason, who are you taking in this game?
I'm taking Oklahoma State, and I think they're going to win by a good bit.
That's a good pick. Laramie, who are you taking?
I also have West Virginia. for no reason other than a guess.
All right. I'm going to take Oklahoma State. Again, they really struggled here lately. They got thumped last weekend by the rival Oklahoma, so I think they're a little upset. But they're bowl eligible. They're going to come out. I think Spencer Sanders gets a good send-off from Oklahoma State this weekend. Next game up we have is Oregon at Oregon State. Slade was so anxious to talk about this game. This will be 3:30 on ABC. Oregon is a 3.5-point favorite. The over/under is 57. Nick is going to take Oregon State. I guess Slade, who are you taking?
Yeah, I already said it. I was going with Oregon. I think that Bo Nix is really going to be able to ball out today. I think that he's had a tough time from QB perspective in first quarters so far the last couple weeks, and so I see him coming out and getting his team on the right track. I think that they're going to be up 14 points in the first quarter. I think they're going to come out firing.
Mason, who do you got?
So I'm going with
Answer very carefully.
I'm going with Oregon because they've been having good games so far, and I think they're going to win another one.
Oh, I appreciate that. Laramie, who do you got?
I also have Oregon because I am graciously hosting George here at my house, and I would rather not see him cry all afternoon or be angry and throw something at my nice TV. So hopefully they win, and he stays happy the rest of the day.
I'm also going to take Oregon as well. I think they understand, listen, we win and we're into the Pac-12 title game against USC. There's still a chance for us to get to the Rose Bowl. There's still a chance for an Eater 6 Bowl on the line. And so I think they have that added motivation. Hopefully Bo Nix is a little bit healthier this week. He can at least run the ball. But we saw how well Oregon moved the ball last week with Bo Nix not being able to bring that running element to the game as well. The only thing I'm asking Oregon is just not run any dumb trick plays for no reason to start the second half. That just hands the ball to the other team for an easy touchdown.
I don't like the fourth down plays either, where they play like they don't know what's going on and then they just snap the ball because the line doesn't know if they're actually doing this or if they're going to call a timeout with the second left. It's just nerve-wracking.
You don't like it. I like it. It's fine. Next game up we got is Minnesota at Wisconsin. This will be 3:30 on ESPN. Wisconsin is a 3.5-point favorite at home. The over/under is 34.5. Nick is going to take Wisconsin at home. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm going Minnesota here. I think that they're going to really be able to close out the season on a strong note. I know that they've been plagued with injuries here throughout the season, but I think that they're going to really be able to run the ball very well today.
Mason, who do you got?
So I have Minnesota, and so that's really all I have to say because I don't really know much about this game.
Uncle Laramie, who do you got?
I believe I took Wisconsin. And along Mason's line, this game really doesn't matter. It matters to them. One of those teams has to win. But in the end, these two teams underperformed, I think, this year. So, yeah.
And I also misspoke earlier. I believe I said Wisconsin would win.
Purdue.
It's Purdue. And so Purdue wins today. They are into the Big 12 or Big 10 championship game, which I think would be a much better game than Iowa. But I'm going to take Wisconsin at home. Again, I think them being at home is the advantage here. And we've seen their defense really step up the last few weeks. Minnesota's offense has taken a huge step back. They kind of lucked into a win against Nebraska the other week, or Nebraska just handed away, whichever one you want to say. Speaking of Purdue, we have Purdue at Indiana. This will be 3:30 on the Big Ten Network. Purdue is a 10.5-point favorite. The over/under is 55.5. Nick is going to take Purdue at home. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah,
on the road. Purdue's on the road.
Yeah, we've talked about how the West has not really had any performing teams this season, but I think Purdue is much more favored than the 10.5 points that they're giving them. Indiana is very bad.
Yeah. Mason, who do you got?
So I have Purdue, and I think they're going to crush Indiana by a mile.
It's a bold statement. Laramie, who do you got in this one?
I also have Purdue, so we'll see here if the jinx is on.
Yeah. So I'm taking Purdue. I think Aiden O'Connell has really stepped up the last few weeks. I know they struggled against Iowa, and that's why they're in this situation. But I think they get it done today. And again, shout out to Iowa for, making the Big Ten championship game. And next game up we have is Wake Forest at Duke. Big game in the ACC. Not really. This will be 3:30 on the ACC network. Wake is a 3.5-point favorite. The over/under is 66.5. Nick is going to take Wake Forest on the road. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, I went opposite. I went with Duke here. I think that they have a really good chance at the upset alert.
Thanks for putting that in there.
I thought that I did. Did I not put that in there? Oh, no, I put Wake. Never mind. I went with Wake. Anyway. I don't know. I think that Duke's going to be able to cover. I think this is going to be a very close game, I should say.
Mason, who do you got?
So I have Wake Forest, and I think they're gonna beat Duke in overtime.
That explains it. Laramie, who do you got?
I'm going with Duke for no reason other than just a guess again.
All right, so we're back. I'm going to take Wake Forest. I think Laramie took Duke for the sole reason that we were just trying to work out some technical difficulties here. This is what happens when you don't put the smartest people in charge of a podcast. I think Laramie took Duke for the simple fact he's a Duke fan in basketball anyway. But yeah, I'm going to take Wake Forest. I think Sam Hartman is going to get it together here. He looked really good last week. I know he struggled against UNC in the first half 2 weeks ago. But I think Wake Forest has this, and they head to the bowl season happy. Next game up we got is Iowa State at TCU. Again, TCU is fighting to stay alive in the college football playoff race. They need to win the next 2 weeks in order to hopefully guarantee that spot for them. They've given scares the last 2 weeks as well. And so this will be 4 p.m. on Fox. TCU is a 10.5-point favorite. The over-under is 47.5. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah.
Sorry, Nick's taking TCU now.
Yeah, in agreement with Nick. I'm going with TCU. I think that this is going to kind of be their cakewalk week, and then I think that they're going to have a big test with whoever they face in the Big 12 conference because they had close games with both teams that they're possibly going to be facing in the coming weeks.
Mason, who do you got?
So I have TCU, and I think it's going to be a very close game with about maybe a score of 35 points.
That's a good pick. Laramie, who do you got?
I also have TCU. I believe that they really need to show up and just dominate. If they don't, I think they could fall out of the top four. Even with their record, if they keep having these close games, the committee is not going to respect that at all. They need to win, and they need to win big.
I 100% agree there. I'm going to go with TCU as well. I think Iowa State is a good team for them to play to be able to have a statement game, but the problem is they need to go out there and do that. I would also argue TCU Baylor should be being played this weekend, not last weekend, because I think that's a better rivalry. I don't think this is a rivalry at all, but that's just me. But yeah, I'm going to take TCU at home. They're going to send their seniors off happy today, and then they're going to go to Dallas next week and play Kansas State. Next game up we got is South Carolina at Clemson. Clemson, again, is already locked into the ACC championship game next weekend. South Carolina coming off that huge upset over Tennessee. So this should be a very good game, but Clemson's favored by 14.5 at noon on ABC. The over-under is 50.5. Nick is going to take Clemson at home. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm going with Clemson here. I think that South Carolina showed that they can play great offense last week. I just don't think that they're capable of doing it multiple weeks in a row.
Yeah. Mason, who do you got?
Yeah, so I have Clemson, and I think they're going to beat them for at least 14 points.
It's a big win.
It's getting spread.
Larry, who do you got?
I have South Carolina. Unfortunately, at this house, I doubt anybody's going to see this game because of when it's being played, and with the Michigan fans here. But I think they get the upset. Again, all personal. I want Clemson to lose and just drop in the rankings.
I 100% agree. I want Clemson to lose, but I think they win. I think South Carolina's too much of a high right now. They're going to crash. Spencer Rattler, we saw last week how much potential he has, why he was a Heisman contender at Oklahoma, and before he just fell apart against Texas and got pulled, and then we never saw him again. But the problem of Spencer Rattler is he'll play like that one game, and the next game he'll go out and he'll throw 5 picks. So until he shows me he can consistently play well, I think he's going to have a bad game this week, and I think that's going to cost South Carolina. South Carolina's defense is pretty good, especially against the run. We saw them. That's what killed Tennessee last week. Is they could not get the run game going to get any play action. Everything relied on the pass, and once you have that, you have a one-dimensional offense, which is a little bit easier to stop, even with Jalen Hyatt. So I think this will be a good game, just because of South Carolina's defense and how bad DJ Uiagalelei sucks. But
good job pronouncing that name.
Slade can. But next game up we have is the famous Notre Dame at USC game. Again, Notre Dame is having a huge bounce back from the rough start to the season. This is a team that lost to Ohio State, Marshall, and Stanford. People were talking that they should never be ranked again, and here they are inside the top 15. Huge implications for their season. If they can get a few spots up in the rankings, they're looking at a possible New Year's Six bowl from where they started. Being a number 6 team will go a long way in that. Nick is going to take USC at home. So obviously he's not an Antep's favorite today. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not going to be your favorite either. I'm going with USC also. I think that Lincoln Riley is trying to create the same effect that Nick Saban has at Alabama, in that he's just going to out-recruit the other schools in whatever division, whatever conference they're playing in. He showed it here. I mean, he was there for 6 weeks before the season started, and they were able to get half the roster from Oklahoma. So, I mean, I think that he's just going to be able to show that if you put enough talent on a team, they'll be able to play.
Yeah. Mason, who do you got? And remember, Mammal is watching.
So I have USC.
Oh,
But yeah, I think they're gonna go and crush Notre Dame.
You are not getting a good Christmas present this year.
I'm rooting for Notre Dame, but I think USC will win.
He just doesn't want to lose the
I'm not
pick.
going to be happy with you. Oh my God, you might need to stay free again tonight. Laramie, who are you taking this week?
I have Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is benefiting from the lose early, win late. If you're going to lose at the beginning of the season, everybody forgets about that. And again, I just want to see chaos in the top 10. So to have them, knock off somebody up there, I'm all for it.
I am too. I'm going to take Notre Dame on the road. This is a team that has had a huge turnaround. We've already seen them upset a number 4 Clemson team. I would argue 100% this USC team is better. But I think the way Notre Dame has been playing the last few weeks, after that Stanford loss, this team has really come together. Their defense, like I said, is playing like one of the best in the country. I think it's going to give Caleb Williams his toughest test of the season. And I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. It's going to come down to the wire. And this is going to be Caleb Williams' game. If he really is a Heisman candidate, this is going to be the game he steps up and shows it. But I think Notre Dame just has too much luck on their side, to be unironic. And I think they get it done in L.A. Next game up we got is Slade's favorite game this week. We have Kansas at Kansas State. Again, if Kansas State wins, they are in the Big 12 championship game. This will be 8 p.m. on Fox. Kansas State is a 12-point favorite. The over-under is 62.5. Nick is going to take Kansas State. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm going with Kansas here. I think, like I just mentioned a little bit ago, I think that whoever
You and I need that talk.
You guys are not communicating very well on your picks. I tell you what.
You pick Kansas. That's fine. Go ahead.
Oh, did I not?
I could have sworn I said Kansas State.
Anyway, I am pretty sure that I did put Kansas State, but anyway, I need Kansas to lose or to win. Yeah, I need Kansas to win. But anyway, I think that whether Kansas State wins this game or if they lose, I think that TCU is going to have a problem with whoever they face. They had a tough game against both these teams, so I think that this is a big game that Kansas State could get to kind of build on the momentum that they need to go into next week then.
Yeah, absolutely. Mason, who do you got in this game?
So I have Kansas State, and I think they will win by a good bit.
Really upsetting Slade over there today. Laramie, who do you got?
I believe I have Kansas. However, when I looked last night at the games you asked me to pick, I thought I was picking Kentucky. So that's how we ended up here.
This is the same guy who told me, 10 games. I picked all 10 games. And he counted Kansas State as 2 words.
South Carolina.
As 2
teams.
words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to get his pick for another game then. Jen, even the look. I'm going to take Kansas State at home. I think they get it done. I think they get that rematch with TCU. I think that game next week is going to be huge. Again, whether they play Texas or Kansas State, that is going to be a very good game. This is two teams that have seen TCU's weak side, but they have also seen TCU's strengths and how they're going to counteract each other. It could be a complete flip-flop game, from those first games for TCU. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun seeing how both of them match up against each other. And it's going to be a fun championship week regardless of how this game goes. Next game up, we have Washington at Washington State. This will be the night game on ESPN, Pac-12 after dark. Washington is a 2-point favorite. The over-under is 58.5. This is the Apple Cup. This is big implications for, again, the Pac-12 championship race. Nick is going to take Washington at home, on the road. Yeah, on the road. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, so I went with Washington here. That's the actual team that I picked. I think that them winning would just be nice because it causes more wow factor when it comes to who's going to make the Pac-12 against USC.
I mean, the Oregon game already we decided by this point.
Right.
If Oregon has won, it doesn't
Correct.
But, I mean, if they lose, this game has all the weight on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you see the other addition to this little, I don't even know what you call it. Even if Washington wins, if UCLA wins, because UCLA...
They did last night.
No, that's right. Last night they won. So, actually, I lied. Oregon's locked into the Pac-12 championship game.
Oh, are they?
Because I thought UCLA played today. That's my mistake. But I believe, and I might even be wrong on this as well, but since UCLA had beaten Washington, they were tied in the standings now. They had the tiebreaker. So effectively, if Oregon lost, UCLA would have the tiebreaker, but Oregon has the tiebreaker over UCLA, even though Washington beat Oregon. I might be wrong in that. It still might.
Yeah, they had a late comeback yesterday.
Mason, who do you got in this game?
So I have Washington, and I think it's going to be pretty far scoring and around 30 points.
Alrighty. Laramie, who do you got?
I also have Washington. That's it.
Okay, good pick. I'm going to pick Washington State. I think, again, this game is a fun rivalry to watch, but it's Pac-12 after dark. Dumb things always happen when Pac-12 teams play this late at night. I think it's going to be a really good back-and-forth game, but something is bound to happen when you add a rivalry on top of that, too. I think it's just going to be a wacky game back and forth. I can see it either being the highest-scoring football game we've ever seen ever, or it could be a 2-point safety battle back and forth all night. But I'm going to take Washington State at home. They didn't let me down when I picked them against Wisconsin earlier this year, so we'll have to see how that works out. But it is time now for the Week 13 Jack Wagon Sports Game of the Week. And without further ado, let's get into it. That's right. So, again, we try and be different from other shows and pick different games for our game of the week. This is one of those weeks, though, that we just couldn't do that. Slade wanted to, but we're not doing that. You can't pick against a number 3 versus number 2 team in the country. Even when I want to pick the MAC West championship battle, I'm not allowed to, especially on weeks like this. So Michigan at Ohio State, the big noon game on Fox. Ohio State is actually an 8-point favorite. The over-under is 57.5. Nick is going to take Michigan. Slade, who do you got?
Yeah, I'm going opposite. I'm going Ohio State. I think that C.J. Stroud has really proved to be the difference this season, and I think he's going to continue that today. I think him and Harrison are going to combine for 2 touchdowns together.
Mason, now, I want to see some excitement with this pick. So you got to show off for your daddy at home. Who are you taking in Michigan, Ohio State?
So I'm going for Michigan, and partly because my dad that's his favorite team, and I think they're gonna go and dominate Ohio State.
Wow. That is a
Bold prediction.
Yeah. Now, if you could pick any college football team in the world to root for, to be your team, who would you pick?
I'm not entirely sure. It would either be North Carolina or Michigan.
Okay. Two solid picks there. Laramie, who do you got this week?
I went with Michigan. That's who I want to see win. That's why I picked them. But it's not going to surprise me if they lose.
Yeah. I'm going to take Ohio State here. I think them being at home makes a difference in this game. This is a rivalry. I love seeing it played back and forth every year, but it would also be really cool to see this played at a neutral site field. But the amount of arrest based on people fighting in the stands would be abhorrently high. And so that's probably a good thing they don't do that. But Blake Corum might not be 100% healthy today. I think he's still listed as questionable this morning. Donovan Edwards, I believe, is also questionable. So that's the 1-2 punch Michigan has relied on all year. We saw with those two out last week, Michigan really struggled to run the ball. And if that's the case, you're putting the ball in J.J. McCarthy's hands. I've not seen enough from him passing-wise when they're playing quality opponents. Yeah, he tore up Hawaii and Colorado State and those teams. But this is a much better defense than that. But we've seen him struggle to throw the ball at times against quality opponents. And so that's another big reason. J.J. McCarthy versus C.J. Stroud. And in that atmosphere, I have C.J. Stroud with an advantage. I think that's why Ohio State wins this game.
Yeah, I think that, like you had said, you're going to see a quarterback battle here. We've seen C.J. Stroud tested when he has to throw. He's able to make those passes. McCarthy hasn't had to make those throws, and it matter whether they win the game or not. Him not being able to hand the ball off to Blake Corum today, I think, is going to be the big difference. I also think that it being at Ohio State, like you said, their players being able to go into halftime, kind of get that prep and stuff like that, and not have just gotten hit on the side of the head with a helmet. I think that's going to be a big difference.
Also, Blake Corum was upgraded to probable 20 minutes ago. So he's going to go regardless. He's going to give it his best effort, but is he 100%? Is it going to make a difference? Although, on the same side, we've seen Ohio State struggling with injuries this year as well, especially at running back. Trayvon Henderson has struggled. I believe it's been rumored he's just been sitting out the last few weeks, staying healthy for this game, getting right. They've also had some trouble at the wide receiver position. Again, if that, I feel like that adds a neutralizing element to it. But again, I think C.J. Stroud is just enough or just better enough than J.J. McCarthy to get Ohio State to this win. And
I think Corum's going to be used as a pawn. I think that they're going to play him out there so that the defense is expecting the run, and they might hand the ball off to him a couple of times with that, and he'd get, 2 to 5 yards or something like that. But I don't think they're going to be expecting 25-yard runs out of him like they've been able to.
As we can see here, Mason is now getting coal for Christmas, and the Slade and Nick are on Aunt Deb's naughty list. But those are our games for this week. We had a lot of fun doing this episode with all of us together. We hope you enjoyed it at home as well. Thank you all so much for checking us out. We will still be back next week for championship weekend. We'll hopefully have a fun show for you next week as well. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day. Enjoy the day. Actually, I'm sorry, back up. We forgot the last thing. Boy or girl, gender reveal is today. And so we'll go across the board here.
The most important pick of the day.
Yeah, this is the most important pick of the day.
I'm going to go girl, and I think that we're going to see tears out of George for that today. Hopefully not the Oregon game.
I'm going to go boy. However, I am rooting for George to miss the punt and fall on his butt on camera.
Oh, he's kicking the football.
Yeah. All right, Mason.
So, yeah, I'm going.
No, go ahead.
I'm going boy because almost every single first baby has been a boy so far, and I think it's going to be another boy. Also, I hope the same thing as Uncle Laramie.
Yeah. That's okay. My original plan for this was I wanted to throw the football at the back of Mason's head and have it explode, but I was told by Hannah that I shouldn't do that.
Can't see why that happened.
I'm not going to make a pick just because I don't want to seem. I do not know, but I don't want to. If I'm right, I know I'm just going to get upset.
My money is on George crying either way.
Yeah, well, I think I'm gonna
whether it's 100%. For the baby or
right?
Oregon.
Yep. Yeah, he's crying today either way.
Or he's just going to come out and punch me in the stomach, and I'm going to be crying. But again, thank you all so much for checking us out this week. We will see you right back here next week. Well, not here, but back here on Jackwagon Sports next week for Championship Saturday. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you guys next week.